Okay, everyone, so now we're ready. Welcome to tonight's session. Today is review number one, actually, of your book, and we're gonna start with unit number one, actually, and hopefully you will learn all the grammar very easily. Okay, so as you can see, guys, B1 Plus course, unit number one, grammar. We're just gonna focus on both the grammars or grammatical topics from unit number one, and I'll be your course instructor once again. Very, very nice to hear you guys. Okay, so let's continue. The contents, what things are we going to talk about, right? So the first one or the first section will be about subject and object questions. It's a very, very easy concept, so don't let it confuse you, just listen very carefully. And the other section that we're going to talk about, it will be about present simple and present continuous. Okay, so starting with, of course, section number one, subject and object questions. If you do have any questions, just keep them at the end, and then when we're done with the section, you can ask it, okay? So, starting in here, guys, subject and object questions. Something that is very, very common and everybody knows in English is that most questions in English language need an auxiliary verb or a helping verb, as some people call it, and we mostly put it before the subject, okay? In questions, we put the auxiliary verb or the helping verb before the subject. And the auxiliary verb or the auxiliary can be positive or even it can be negative. For example, where do you want to go today? And here do becomes the auxiliary verb, or even like just a normal yes no question. Has he done his assignments once again, sorry, I'm using an auxiliary verb. Okay, so you have it in most questions. And the general structure that many questions in English have, they come in this category. So the first, at the first, your question is going to start with a question word. Now, this question word can be when, who, what, which. Most of these WH words can be called question words. Okay, we're going to start with that. And after that, we're going to go to the auxiliary verb or, in general, the verb be itself. And after that, you're going to have the subject itself, and then you're going to have the main verb. If you have an auxiliary verb, you're going to have a main verb as well. If you don't have an auxiliary verb, you directly have the be verb as the main verb, so another main verb is not needed. And then you have the rest of the sentence. Now, this is the general structure of most questions in English language, right? See, like the first one, we can say, when can I see you? When can I see you has all of them inside, right? But then you also have some other questions that do not really require any question word, and they start from the auxiliary verb. We call them yes no questions. It's kind of like, is he a doctor? Is he a doctor? But as you can see, we don't also have a main verb. So why is that? We don't have a main verb, guys, because in here we don't really have an auxiliary verb. Okay, be or is in this case is the main verb. It's be. Okay, it's not a normal helping verb. And a doctor becomes the rest of the sentence or complement. And then you have the other technique where you have does she love beans, for instance, where you don't have a question word, but you do have a main verb, and in here, does becomes the auxiliary verb. So this is the general structure. Many of the, questions in English will have something like this. Okay, but what about subject questions? What are they and why are they important? So when we don't know the subject of a sentence, right? Like sometimes it happens. You have a sentence. I mean, you know the action itself. You know who received the action or what received the action, but you don't know the doer, right? Sorry. Yes. So those times, what do you do? When you don't know the subject of a sentence, you can ask subject questions to find the subject. For instance, instead of saying she works at the bank, you can say, well, like if you don't know she in this case, right? You want to find she, then your question will be like, who works at the bank? Okay. Your question will be like, who works at the bank? So the answer will be she works at the bank. It's a very easy one, so don't let it confuse you. Going to the next one. Subject questions have the same structure as the normal statements. So this is something that kind of many people, uh, love about subject questions, is because they have a very easy, structure. The word syntax or the overall structure or the word order is the same as the normal statements. Like your normal statement would start with a subject, an auxiliary verb, if the tense needs it, and then a main verb and then complementer, and or an object. And subject questions do the same. The only difference is that because you don't have the subject, you don't know the subject, instead of the subject we're using a question word like who, what, which, or something else. And that who, what, or whatever question words, they become the acting subject. Okay, they become the temporary subject. Example: Taylor loves her fans. But if you don't know Taylor, if you don't know who loves the fans, then you just put the question word, who loves her fans, and it becomes the answer. Taylor loves her fans. Okay? Sorry, guys, my throat is not very good. Okay, continuing. So, a tip about subject questions. Do not use an auxiliary verb if there isn't one already in the structure. Now, for instance, if you have a sentence like Taylor went to the supermarket or Taylor went to supermarket, actually, I think I forgot the, so put the there. Taylor went to the supermarket. If you change it to a subject question, you just need to remove Taylor and your sentence is correct. Who went to the supermarket? But as you can see in here, Taylor is the subject, went is the main verb, or just the verb in this case, and then you have to the supermarket, which is the rest of the sentence. You don't really have an auxiliary verb. And your subject question also doesn't need it. Who went to the supermarket? You don't need another auxiliary verb. Your sentence is correct, it's normal, it's correct. But if you just go to the other technique and bring an auxiliary verb, like who did go to the supermarket, it is correct. I mean, I'm not going to say it's not correct because you will study this grammar one day in the future as a C1 grammar, an advanced one. It's called emphatic do. But it is completely different. It has a completely different usage, and it's only used for mostly like emphasis and those things. So in normal everyday conversations, if you go somewhere and say like who did go to the supermarket, it's not very good. Okay? So don't use it if the structure already doesn't have it. Why am I saying that if the structure already doesn't have it? Because like some tenses have auxiliary verbs even in normal statements and positive statements. For instance, it can be the present perfect. Taylor has gone to the supermarket. In the question, when you make it in the subject question, you still have has. You still have the helping verb. Okay, so you just say who has gone to the supermarket instead of Taylor has gone to the supermarket. So, present perfect is okay, other perfect tenses is okay, but in the past simple and in the present simple, I believe, only two of them I think we have, that auxiliary verbs are not needed in the positive statements. So when you're changing a positive statement into a subject question, you don't need an auxiliary verb. Okay, tip number 2. Treat the acting subject, meaning the question word in this case, or the temporary subject, as a third person thing singular, a subject like he or she. Okay? And this is mostly done in normal cases. For instance, if you have a sentence like Sonia goes to school every day, when you change it to a subject question, you just say who goes to school every day, right? Who goes to school every day? This is correct, and this is really, really good. But if I say like who go to the school or who go to school every day, my sentence is correct, but only if I'm talking about plural subjects, only when I know that the answer will be plural, only when I know that there will be more than one person who goes to school. Okay, so then I can use it as like a plural one, who go to the school. But in general, in normal cases as written here, it's better to treat the acting subject, like question word in this case, as a third person or thing singular subject. Okay, now continuing. What about questions with prepositions? Now, this is a very easy one. If you have prepositions, they mostly go at the end of questions. Okay, for instance, what is she writing about? what is she writing about? About goes at the end. Or if you have this one, where did you come from? Again, from goes at the end. Now, your book didn't mention it, but I'm just gonna say it on the side. You can bring it at the beginning as well. You can say like, about what is she writing, or from where did you come? I mean, these are possible cases, but they're not really, how do you say, modern English. Like people today, people in this day and age would not actually use, a sentence like that. So just keep that reserved for very, very formal occasions or some poetic literature or something like that. Okay. So in everyday conversations, just and mostly even in formal cases today, prepositions go at the end of questions. And we also have another tip now. So in here we have some structures that we can use, some fixed structures that we can use to, elevate our speaking skill, let's say. So if you have the structure like what blank like, what is Dubai like, what is that person like, you can use this structure, or even how blank. Of course it continues, like how is that person, or how was whatever. We use these two structures for asking about descriptions of a person. Okay, for instance, like what was the manager like? Oh, yeah, she seemed nice. She seemed nice, meaning that she was a good person. What was the manager like? And if you say, like, how blank, whatever, it continues to ask about a health of a person, or the health of a person. For instance, how is your sister? She is fine. She is fine. But we can also use what blank like, or how blank, to talk about or to ask about description of a thing or an event. For instance, what was Dubai like? Oh, it was amazing. I had lots of fun. So in here, you can also use it not only to talk about the description of a person, but also to ask about the description of a thing or even an event. Okay? Okay, so we have section 2, but before we go there, I'm just gonna stop the recording, and if you guys have any questions, you can ask. Okay, guys, so section number 2, present simple and present continuous. Let's talk about it. So present simple, guys, have or has, let's say, sorry, has these three uses, okay? These three uses. The first use, or the first usage, the one that we have for the present simple, is talking about facts which are true all the time, or at least generally. Okay, for instance, the sun rises in the east. This is a fact, and when we're talking about this kind of fact, we're using the present simple. Present simple can also talk about habits and routines. For instance, I go to school every day, or she um, drives her car every Friday, or whatever, like whatever kind of routine or habit you want to say. And the last one is kind of like an opinion or a belief. If you're talking about your opinion or an idea you have, it can also be present simple. For instance, Brock Lesnar is the greatest wrestler in the world. Now, this is your opinion, this is your belief system, let's say, so you can use present simple for that. Okay. But what about present continuous? Now, present continuous also has three uses in here. The first one is it can talk about actions which are in progress at the moment of speaking. So, right now, exactly right now. For instance, she's speaking on the phone. It can also talk about actions or situations around the moment of speaking, meaning that if it's not, sorry, if it's not happening right now, exactly right now, it's at least happening around it. Okay, for instance, I'm studying Spanish. Maybe right now I'm not studying Spanish because right now I'm teaching you. But when I'm done with the class, then I go and study my Spanish. But it is something that is, mainly happening around the moment of speaking. And the last one, it can also talk about future arrangements, but just be careful with the help of time expressions. Okay, for instance, he is meeting his friends for dinner tonight. Now, the moment you see the word tonight, you know that it's a future arrangement, because let's say tonight hasn't come yet. So hasn't come yet, so you can use it for future arrangements. Okay. But there are some tips for you about present continuous. Do not use the present continuous for the following things. Don't use the present continuous for mental states like verbs like know, understand, and believe. Don't use the present continuous for likes and preferences like verbs like and love and hate. Don't use the present continuous for other states, such as, the verbs like be or own or belong or forget. Don't use the present continuous, just use the present simple and you will be fine. But there are some special cases. For instance, we have these kind of verbs that can be a state verb, can also be an action verb, and they can be used with the present simple, and they can also be used with the present continuous as an action verb. So why? So, we don't really know because they are actually like that. But what we as language learners can do is just we can learn them. For instance, it can be a think, the first one and the most common one. The first one, like, the first example in here, I think you're wrong about this. This is an opinion, this is a state. You're not losing any energy in here. It's just your opinion. But if you say, like, I'm thinking about my future, now it's a mental process, now it's an action. Okay. Another one's like see. I see what you're trying to say. Now, like, it means I understand. It's again a state verb. But if you say I'm seeing her tomorrow, it means that you're meeting her tomorrow. So it's an action, okay? And the last one, also very common, is have. I have a car is a possession. It's talking about possession or ownership. It's a state verb. But if you say I'm having a pizza tomorrow, now it means that you're experiencing it or you're eating it. So this one falls into the action verb category. Okay. And I think we are done. Yes, yes. So I'm gonna stop the recording again. If you do have any questions, ask it. Okay, so everyone, let's now go to unit number two's grammar, okay? So B1 Plus course, once again, unit 2 grammar. I'm your course instructor, very happy to be here. Going with the contents, two things that we're going to talk about. First one is going to be present perfect simple and the past simple. I mean, the difference between them mainly, and also the present perfect simple and also the present perfect continuous, meaning once again, the explanations, of course, and also the differences. Starting with section number 1, present perfect simple and past simple. Okay, go on, guys. Okay, let's see. The structure. Let's talk about the structure. So the present perfect simple, guys, is formed by using have and the past participle or verb number 3 of the main verb. For example, I have studied English for 2 years. This is the present perfect. Um, and it has the following uses, let's say. So use number 1, the present perfect simple is used to talk about experiences in our lifetime or another unfinished time period. Okay, for instance, she has visited Paris 3 times. She may visit again in the future as well. So that's why we're gonna say that it's just an experience in your lifetime and maybe and most of the time at least not finished time period. So your life is also not done, or her life in this case is not done. So of course she might visit again in the future. So what about use number 2? The present perfect simple, guys, is also used to talk about recent events, often with a present result. For instance, he has broken his arm. He has broken his arm. What is the present result? The present result is the fact that his arm is still broken. Okay, the arm is still broken, so he cannot really use his arm, which of course shows the present result. Okay, what about use number 3? The present perfect simple, guys, can also express unfinished states. Unfinished states, like just, already, and yet, or kind of like with these kind of adverbs. Okay, for instance, or for example, I've just finished my homework. I've just finished my homework. It means that I finished it a moment ago. I finished it a moment ago. Okay, so it shows something that is nearly unfinished states. Yeah, it kind of goes in that category, but it's much even better to say that this one is more of a recent state one, and for unfinished states, you can also say like I have lived in Kabul for 10 years. Now that is a much better example. Yeah, sorry guys, I'm gonna modify that. Okay, going to other one. You can also use for and since, okay? We use for to give the duration of an action or state, or since to give the starting point. For instance, or for example, they have lived here for 10 years. For 10 years, meaning that they started living here 10 years ago and they still live here now. Okay, so this is the usage of for and since. What about past simple, guys? So the use for the past simple is very easy. We just, got them all in just one slide here. The past simple is a verb tense used to describe completed actions in the past. For example, she didn't get the job. The action of not getting the job is completed in the past and it's not continuing. It's done. She didn't get it, so what's the point? Done completely. Okay, so that's why we say completed actions in the past. We use past simple. Okay. But what about the formation? How do you create it? So the past simple, guys, is formed by adding ed to regular verbs or using the second form of the irregular verbs. For example, the interviews finished 5 minutes ago. Okay, finished is a regular verb with ed added, and saw is an irregular verb with the second form used as an example for you if you want to use it. Okay, what about some time expressions? The past simple is often used with a time expression or time expressions, such as last week, a few days ago, when I was a child, and etc. For instance, why did you miss the bus last week? Last week. Last week is a time expression that indicates a completed past time period. Okay? Okay, now coming to the very important question, past simple or present perfect. So the past simple is used to describe a completed action in the past, while the present perfect is used to describe an action that is started in the past and is still ongoing or has just been completed. For example, I've lost my keys. I have lost my keys. This is the present perfect. It means that the action of losing the keys is started in the past and is still ongoing. You haven't found it yet. But when you say I lost my keys, this is the past simple equivalent of that sentence. It means that the action of losing the keys is completed in the past. Okay? Is completed is completed and also it's in the past. So, maybe you found it again. We don't really know. But when you say, I have lost my keys, you haven't found it yet. That's why you're using present perfect and not past simple. Okay, what about some time expression differences? The past simple is often used with time expressions that indicate a specific or even finished past time period, such as last week, few days ago, or when I was a child, as mentioned before. The present perfect is often used with time expressions that indicate an unfinished or unspecified past time period, such as ever, never, recently, so far, and etc. So the more common one would be the unfinished time expressions. Okay, for example, she has never been to London. Never been to London. This is the present perfect. It means that she has not been to London in her entire life. And the entire life is an unfinished time period. She's still alive. But when you say she went to London last year, this is the past simple and it means that she went to London in a specific past time period, which is 365.5 days or whatever, in total last year. Okay, in this case. Okay, what about providing details? Now, this is a very good part. I really hope that you learn this one very easily. The present perfect, guys, is often used to introduce a topic. Okay, it's used to what? To introduce a topic with a general statement. And then you can then change to the past simple to give more details or more examples. For instance, I have visited many countries in Europe. I went to France last summer and I saw the Eiffel Tower. The first sentence uses the present perfect to introduce the topic of visiting countries in Europe, and the second sentence uses the past simple to give a specific example of visiting France, which is, seeing the Eiffel Tower. So before we go to section 2, guys, if you do have any questions, just raise your hand. Okay, guys, so if you don't have any questions, let's now go on to section 2. Okay, so present perfect simple and the present perfect continuous. Okay, so the present perfect simple is used to describe an action or a state that is started in the past and continues up to the present. It is often used to describe a situation that is still true or relevant. For example, we've used this car for several years and it has never broken down. The action of using the car started in the past and is still true now because the car is still working and you're still using it. Okay? So you didn't sell it, you didn't, exchange it for a new car, you're still using it. That's what it means when you say, like, we've used this car for several years. But what about the continuous one? The present perfect continuous, guys, is used to describe an action or situation that started in the past and is still ongoing. It is often used to describe a situation that is still happening or incomplete. For example, how long have you been waiting? The action of waiting started in the past and is still happening now. Okay, so the waiting is not finished. The action of waiting is not finished. It's not done. Okay, so now coming to a difference between them. We use the present perfect and continuous with the action verbs that express an activity or process, such as wait, work, study, and etc. And we use the present perfect simple with state verbs mostly that express a condition or situation, such as know, own, live, and etc. Okay? For example, she's known him since they were children. Know is a state verb that expresses a condition. The condition of knowing him started in the past and is still true now. But when you say, I've been working on this project for 2 months, work is an action verb that expresses an activity. And the activity of working on the project started in the past and is still ongoing. Okay? A tip. Some verbs can be used as both action verbs and also as state verbs, with no important change in the meaning. For instance, you can say, how long have you worked here? Or how long have you been working here? Both of them will be really good with no important change. Why am I saying important? Why am I really focusing on this? Because there is a small change. I mean, if you think about it, technically there is a small change, but it doesn't really matter. It's not that important, but I'll just say it for you. If you say the first one, like, how long have you worked here? It gives a feeling of a more of a permanent thing. But if you say, like, how long have you been working here? It gives a temporary vibe to it, meaning that maybe the person is not planning on staying here and working anymore. So it's a temporary thing, or it's a temporary activity. But when you say the first one, it feels more permanent. Okay, so but this is not very important. And in everyday conversations, people don't even care. So it's okay. You can say that some verbs can be used like that. And some of those verbs are actually work, let's say, or the one is specific example for these. Some of those verbs is work. Okay, continuing. So in the present perfect simple, guys, result is important. Now you will see why I say result is important. This sentence, guys, will actually help you a lot. Remember this: result is important in the present perfect simple. So the present perfect simple is used to describe an action that has been completed recently and has a result in the present. For example, I have painted the house. In this case, or in this sentence, the action is painting the house. And the result is the fact that the house looks nice. Okay? This tense is used to emphasize the result of the action rather than the action itself. So meaning that it focuses on the result and it doesn't really focus on the action. In other words, result is important. Result is more important than the action or the progress or the process itself even. Okay? But what about the other one? Present perfect continuous, in here, activity is important, or the process is important. The present perfect continuous is used to describe an activity that has a result now. It focuses on the activity itself rather than the result. For instance, I'm tired because I've been painting the living room. In this example, the result or the effect of painting the living room is that the house smells of paint, or maybe because you're tired. Because you're what? You're tired. So in this case, I'm tired because I've been painting the living room. You're more focused on the activity. The activity of painting the living room made you feel tired. But if you are more focused on the result, it would be the fact that the living room is now very, very clean. But you're not focused on that. Okay? Okay, so what about some new habits? If you're talking about new habits and, I don't know, repeated activities, again, we have a good tense for you. The present perfect continuous is used to describe repeated activities that is started recently. It is used to emphasize that the activities is still ongoing and has not finished yet. For example, I've been doing a lot of exercise lately. In the past, I didn't do much exercise, so it's a new habit for me, okay? We can use it with time expressions such as lately, recently, for the last few days, for the last few weeks, that indicate recency, that indicate the recentness or the frequency of the activity in the past few days, or in the in lately, let's say, or in the for the past few weeks or days or months, whatever you want to say. We can also use what? Time expressions in general. The more common one would be, of course, lately and recently. And we are done. So I'm going to stop the recording. Any questions? Good. Very good. Okay, we have another question as well. Yes, Ruben. Any other questions, guys? Okay, very good then. So I think we're done with this. Let me just stop the recording completely now. Okay.